Right, good evening, everybody. I think perhaps it might help if we split the agenda.
Council house tenants meet their lawyer. They face the threat of eviction. The Labour Council wants to privatise their estate, their homes. It's part of an unusual property boom. Some 30 authorities already selling 100 council estates and the tenants being moved on.
I was compare it with the American Indians who were pushed from one ghastly reservation to another as the white men wanted them.
Teesside, once an industrial heartland, today, like many other places, blighted by unemployment. But for one man up here, the battle isn't for a job, though he's unemployed. It's for his home, a council home. The Labour Council want him out.
We were told we had to get out because our area was being sold off. It was as simple as that, you know, no consultation. We had to get out. I mean, like I say, we've both been unemployed now for nearly 3 years. This is all we've got, apart from each other. And we intend to fight for it.
Outside their window, the excavators are already preparing the estate for the private owners. The vast majority of the forest neighbours have already left without a fight. But not Dave and Kathy Forrest.
This home's built with love. And if they think they're just going to come along and turf me out, there's no damn way they're going to do it at all. Love and hard work built this, and they're not going to take it away from me. I mean, you can see what we've done. We've built this home up. It is a home. We've brought a family up. They love it, we love it. It's like me neighbours. They love their homes. They've also gone through a lot of heartache. But what keeps you going at the end of the day is you're fighting for your home. That's all we want. It's not against the law, sure, Willie. We want to keep our homes. It's not a lot to ask when you've got nothing.
The forests have been told to leave as part of a council plan to privatise the area. Langbaurgh Council, short of money to do up council property, is turning to private developers and government grants to help sell houses like these to raise money to improve others. The forests may not be alone. Nearly 100 council estates are going private. These two tower blocks are a graphic illustration of where local councils are increasingly looking for a solution to a dilemma. The dilemma: how do you do up decaying council estates when you haven't got the money? Here, for instance, it would cost Westminster City Council £4 million to do up these tower blocks alone. Money which they haven't got. One solution: you sell off one tower block, and with the money you make on that, you do up the other. The only trouble is the tenants. In the shadow of the tower blocks, older property, where tenants fear they will be involved in Westminster Council's overall scheme.
You see, you get used to a place and you get used to the neighbours, and I don't want to go away. It would kill me. I couldn't live a minute, I think, if I went to a new place.
The tenants' message is clear, although the council insists these houses will be improved, not sold.
I'm going to put up a fight. Would she like, saying it was whoever's doing this dirty war, would they like it done to them? Would they?
Chairman, may we now continue with the meeting? If the noise does not stop, I am going to adjourn the meeting and clear the public gallery. The meeting is adjourned.
A meeting of Westminster City Council's Housing Committee, and the police stand by.
So much for the...
Take a look at this poor first here.
The Housing Committee must decide which of several options for modernisation, including privatisation, to recommend to the full council. The adjournment infuriates the protesters.
We haven't got any argument with the police. Let's go have a meeting at County Hall.
After the meeting, I asked the chairman why a wealthy council like Westminster was looking to private developers to bail them out.
I don't think it's a matter of looking to the private sector to bail us out. I think it makes common sense. If you can get a scheme done at no cost to the taxpayer or the ratepayer or our tenants, that seems to me a very good deal for everybody. We're not a particularly wealthy borough. We have housing problems like any other inner city area in London.
But the fact remains the price of doing that is the loss of a considerable number of units of public housing stock.
No, not at all. I am determined, and so are officers, that we will end up with roughly the same number of rented unit in the public sector, one way or another, as there are now.
The tenants remain unconvinced about the final outcome, and Ken Livingstone, their local GLC councillor, mistrusts the principle of privatising estates, whether tower blocks or terraced houses.
Well, as Labour Party has accepted the principle that individual tenants should be able to buy their own homes, and I think that's most probably now a firm fixed right. There's a real difference from taking whole estates and selling them off. An individual buying their own is one thing. Outsiders, property speculators, whatever, getting involved is a completely different matter, and there's no way you can actually expect people who've got real rights as tenants to come under some other different body where they've got less rights. I mean, where people have got a settled community, they have a right to be left in peace, and the work that's done should be what they want, not something imposed on them. Otherwise, if this scheme goes through, there isn't a single council estate anywhere in Britain where they couldn't find the same thing happening.
The wholesale selling off of council estates to private developers would dramatically reduce the amount of council housing available to those who really need it. But its significance can only be assessed once the extent is known, and this proved impossible to discover from official sources because there are no figures. So TVI decided to do its own survey of all the major local authorities.
The survey revealed a flurry of activity across the country. Apart from the schemes in Teesside and Westminster, where 2 estates have already been sold, one of the biggest was in Edinburgh. There, the council has sold half of the giant Priest Hill estate, 750 homes. Wirral Council has for sale 411 homes and has already sold 300. And Basingstoke has sold 5 4-storey blocks. I asked Sir George Young, Junior Environment Minister, why the government were actively encouraging these sales.
What we are trying to do, through the arrangements that your programme has been looking at, is to make home ownership a reality for more people, thereby relieving the local authority of the obligation to look after them, and they can then concentrate on those for whom there is no alternative at all.
At the cost of losing council rented stock for the future.
The houses are still there. They don't vanish off the face of the earth if they're transferred to a building society.
But those houses no longer belong to the council.
But they're occupied by people, they're in better condition, and many of them are empty. They're uninhabitable at the moment. And with this sort of initiative, we can bring them back into use.
The Estates Gazette is where local councils advertise estates for sale. This one contains details of the latest offering. 200 to 300 houses on an estate near Halifax. The advertisement attracted 30 bids from private developers. The estate, with views across the Pennines, is visited today by the man from the government's newly formed agency, URU, the Urban Housing Renewal Unit. It was set up to help councils privatise council estates.
Well, it's typical of quite a lot of estates nationally, and of course you know that URU are going round, hopefully, identifying prospects of whereby mixing in some public investment, some private investment.
URU advisor Bill Woof explains to Halifax's housing director Brian Fairclough that if he sells off half the estate, he could perhaps get him a government grant, which together would be enough to do up the rest of the estate. The housing director accepts the inevitability, but has reservations.
Duty is to make sure that these houses are fully utilised. My concern is that we're only in this position because of continued cuts in our housing investment allocation. We have no resource available to tackle the problem in-house, and I'm quite confident that we've got the expertise in the authority that could tackle this problem given the capital resource. But having said that, we haven't got it. We've got to look to other avenues to turn these properties round.
Well, the government, whether you like it or not, has...
With 4,000 on the council waiting list, Fairclough is reluctant to lose council houses. But the man from URU points out there's little alternative.
Because we've been in the game of housing for a while, that the housing programme has taken a fair battering in the last 6 years. There isn't going to be the sort of money you require.
The estate is a privatiser's dream, half empty because no one wants to live there, and in need of money the council hasn't got. But a privatiser's dream, especially so well sited, is a nightmare for supporters of public sector housing.
The main objection is that there is a need for council housing, where there are people on the waiting list who either want council housing or cannot afford anything else but council housing. Then we have a duty to provide it for them, and those waiting lists are getting longer at present. And really the initiatives of privatisation, even if they work in a handful of cases, in authorities where there isn't that pressure, are not a solution to the overall housing problems of this country.
Opposition to Mrs. Thatcher's housing policy. She was visiting one of the first council tenants to turn homeowner under the Right to Buy scheme.
What they've done with it, it's very exciting. And at the end of the day, you know, there's something eventually to leave to your children, isn't there?
5 years later, Mrs. Thatcher has the satisfaction of knowing that nearly 1 million council houses have so far been sold to their tenants. Critics say the idea of selling individual houses is now being extended to whole estates for 3 reasons. £20 billion is needed for urgent repairs to council houses. This year, the government is only offering £2 billion. But the government is offering special grants if the councils privatise council estates.
Really, we have to see this whole process as part of a plan by the government to force councils to sell properties, first of all under the Right to Buy, and then to sell whole estates off into the private sector, and to generally denigrate and run down council housing, to begin to undermine it, to make council tenants second-class citizens, and to push more and more people into home ownership.
A 12-storey tower block in Rochester, Kent. Not for long, though. It's about to be blown up. When the dust eventually settled, the land was sold for private housing, though the council did get some old people's accommodation out of it. But here it's as much political philosophy as the need for money that lies behind it.
I believe that housing is the prerogative of the private sector. I would very much like to see full privatisation of all housing in this area. Indeed, we have worked very hard in terms of selling. We have a good record, I think one of the highest in the land in terms of selling to people who want to buy. We have a record which indeed improves on that of Wimpey's. We've sold more houses than Wimpey's on an average year over a number of years now. If a few years ago we had told many thousands of people in the country that they couldn't have bought, they would have called us liars. They are now owners, and I believe that we can progress to the stage where everybody can be provided for adequately in the private sector.
What then is his ultimate objective as the council's housing chairman?
Full privatisation of housing.
Rochester's enthusiasm for privatisation may be extreme, but more and more local authorities are doing it. Glasgow, 600 flats on 2 estates sold. Oldham, 2 estates of 300 houses sold. Rochester, estate of 54 homes for sale. Solihull, 200 flats sold. But some housing experts claim the government is playing a double game when they offer councils financial help.
The government creates the problem and then sails in as a saviour with its own particular policy, as if it was solving the problem instead of causing it.
What do you see as the possible long-term consequences of this if more and more councils continue to privatise estates?
One of the consequences is that council housing will be restricted more and more to the least attractive properties, particularly those in the least attractive locations. It's very clear that the developers are looking for locations as much as they're looking for good houses. And so council tenants will be pushed. I was compare it with the American Indians who were pushed from one ghastly reservation to another as the white men wanted them. And so as the developers push out, say, right, this next estate and this next estate, so they will be pushed into the least attractive stock.
On Teesside, the Spencerbeck estate in Langbaurgh is a good example, some people claim, of that principle. A nice estate which should never have qualified for privatisation. That's the view of Shelter's Northern Director, Roy Murphy.
When I arrived, I was told that I was going to be shocked, and I expected to come here and find houses that were dilapidated, like all the other privatisation schemes. When I actually arrived here, I couldn't actually believe that it was a council estate in the first place. It looked like a normal private development. Now, these are precisely the sort of houses that we need in the public sector. These are desperately required by people on council waiting lists. If we sell these, it means we'll virtually sell any form of council housing. I mean, I'm opposed to all privatisation, but I'm bound to say that if we start selling these, then that really means the end of council housing.
The council says that, on the contrary, the whole estate of some 800 houses was in such a bad state that it needs £8.5 million spending on it. So they chose to privatise 137 homes. There's no need to pull them down. They're simply being refurbished, and when that's done, they'll be sold for up to £20,000 each. The council says it needs the money from these houses, some already sold, to do up other parts of the estate. Nevertheless, the critics claim Spencerbeck was chosen because it would appeal to developers, not because it was particularly bad. A view echoed by Dave Forrest, still defiant at number 60.
They've only got to walk round this estate before they touched it and just see the 12-year-old houses up here. They're built to the highest standard, Parker Morris standard, large rooms, plenty of space. People who's only got to come up and see for themselves the type of homes we've got and then ask, why do they need doing?
The irony is Langbaurgh is a Labour-controlled council. The mayor, Councillor Seed, has his name picked out in flowers outside the council offices. He maintains that he had no other choice given the financial restrictions.
The properties are deteriorating and were deteriorating for a considerable time. And we had to use any device we possibly could, and this was one of the best devices we could use to uplift this estate.
But Dave Forrest and others claim they had a right to be consulted about the plans to sell their homes.
I would say the 2 days from 9 in the morning to 8 in the evening is very, very good consultation. Much better than having a meeting where one or two that have all to say get their point of view over and quiet old Mary on the corner and get her point of view over. I would say the consultation was reasonable. Under the circumstances, yes, very reasonable.
You call that consultation as opposed to merely informing them?
No, it was consultation.
We weren't consulted, Peter. We were notified by a newsletter on the 30th of July saying we had to go down to an exhibition on the 13th or 14th of August. Ours happened to be the 13th of August, didn't we? We went down to the Sickling Centre where it was held, went in, a girl on the door, asked us our names, told her. She said, see that dark chap there? So we went over and seen him. He was stood next to a board. There was two wooden boards, actually, with maps on. One showed where the new road went through the estate. The other one showed you the houses the people had to move from so they could carry on with the privatisation of it. And the dark chap stood next to this board. He just said, number. I said, 60 Daleby. He looked at the board. He said, oh, yes. He said, you'll be first out. Now, that was our consultation. We weren't consulted on it. We were told we had to get out.
Most tenants went, accepting other homes and £550 for their trouble. But 3 families decided to stay.
You coming to Peter's?
Yes, yes, what we doing? Got the papers?
Yes,
yeah,
you know
that.
behind us.
They've stuck it out for 15 months now, months which have increased their feelings of injustice, especially as they've always been good tenants.
Your own houses to demolish. I mean, I could cry when I say it because there's so many...
Ethna and Ken Bowes and Dave and Kathy Forrest make their way to the McBrides to plan the next stage in their battle to stay in their homes. It's a battle which has generated a lot of bitterness, but also determination.
We've been battered right into the ground, the families here. Battered into the ground. Our names were being dragged down. We're being called riffraff, scum, Trotskyites, and another thing which was said the other day, that anybody on Social Security or unemployed shouldn't be allowed to live in these houses here. They're too good for us, and it's wrong. I worked, and what I've got there, I worked bloody hard for. Bloody hard.
But the council are so determined that they're taking 2 families to court, the Forrests and the Bowses.
These houses have been described as architectural disasters by the council. The houses round the corner, they put new window frames in, a new foyer, Now, that doesn't stop them being an architectural disaster. If they're architectural disasters, they should have been bulldozed.
The most galling thing for the three families is to see other people who can afford them buying the houses which they claim, apart from new windows and a porch, look much the same as the ones they're being told to quit. And the sales pitch by Barrett's, the council's agents, ironically spells out the very qualities which makes them want to stay. It talks about a superb showpiece development in a sought-after residential area.
3 ladies approached me and they said, "Excuse me, is this house coming down?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, we were told, you know, is it for sale?" I said, "No, I'm sorry, it isn't." "Well, why not?" I said, "Because it's my home, I live here." I said, "This is a council house." She said, "Yes, but you're on the plan from Barrett's, you know, the literature they give out." I said, "I don't care what I'm on." I said, "It is not for sale." She said, "Well, we've been told it is." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, it isn't." She said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Because it's my home and I live here."
Are you not riding roughshod over the tenants' rights in the case of those that you are trying to evict from this estate because they will not move out?
It comes back to the same 3 people. I'm not going to prejudge what the courts may say. As you know, there's a court case pending, and I have no intentions of going into that side of the argument.
Those people have lived here for a number of years. They have poured a lot of money into their houses. For them, they are not just houses, they are homes. And because you wish to raise capital, you are moving or attempting to move them out of their homes. Do you think that is the action of a councillor, of a Labour councillor?
Yes, I think the proper answer for a legitimate socialist is to provide good housing accommodation for all its tenants, And
what about the 3 tenants who are not going to get the benefit of this?
Well, the 3 tenants have absolute choice of where they wish to go.
They want to stay here.
Well, we'll have to wait of the court.
Right, good evening, everybody. I think perhaps it might help if we split...
The tenants meet their lawyer. At issue, the court case for their eviction. The lawyer explains the law, that present legislation does not allow a council to seek eviction because the council wishes to sell the houses. And he explains the council's case.
For whatever loose ends that brings up.
Their case is being brought under the 1980 Housing Act, ironically nicknamed the Tenants' Charter. This does allow the council to seek eviction if they wish to carry out demolition, reconstruction, or other work which cannot be done with the tenants living in the house. The lawyer is fighting the case on the ground that the works are so minor that the eviction is unnecessary.
If Langbaurgh Council's interpretation of the law is correct, then merely by performing certain relatively minor repairs, a landlord can obtain vacant possession of properties and sell at a profit. And that has really quite widespread implications for anybody who lives in a council house and regards that house as his home.
What effect has all this had, do you think, on your clients?
They spend, I'm sure, almost every day worrying about whether or not they will be able to hang on to their own homes. And really, their lives have been effectively ruined for the last year in simply trying to hang on to their own homes.
Dave Forrest must wait till the new year to find out whether he will keep or lose his home. But whatever happens in the short term, in the long term, council tenants face a government proposal to change the law, specifically to allow a council to evict simply because it wishes to sell.
It's a basic attack on people's liberties. The idea of a letter dropping through the letterbox of someone one day saying, "We're going to come and take your home," and they are people's homes, "your home off you, so that we can sell it to a private developer to make money," I believe that is immoral.
And we don't see this power being used left and right the whole time. We see it as a useful reserve power in those rare cases where, for whatever reason, one person is impeding a modernisation scheme.
Even without that reserve power, local authorities have found little difficulty in implementing Sir George's so-called modernisation schemes. Wandsworth, 16 schemes, 1,200 flats. Newcastle, 200 homes for sale, 250 sold. Knowsley, over 3,000 dwellings sold. The TVI survey reveals that no less than 30 local authorities have sold or are selling so far nearly 100 council estates, totalling 13,000 houses.
That's enough to house the population of a town, say, of the size of Canterbury. So by any standards, the idea is becoming a reality and is certain to produce a major political row over the future size and quality of Britain's council housing.
I am being pushed to a point where I shall have to clear the gallery. It is something I have finished. I have not finished. Sit down.
Last night, a full meeting of Westminster City Council joined in that row.
Those against the reference back.
The result was the council agreed to go ahead in principle with a scheme for selling off one tower block.
The streets of Paddington won't be safe for you, mate.
In losing the vote, Labour councillors applauded their backers, the tenants.
I mean, I've spent 15 years fighting for people to get homes, and the only homes that most of them will ever get are council homes. Now, if we get rid of them, if we sell them, then they don't exist for the people that I've been fighting for and that Shelter's been fighting for. And so I believe that privatisation is utterly and completely wrong. It's immoral.
At the end of the day, one has to recall what the object is. It's not just to move people out of their homes for the sake of moving them out of their homes. It's to turn around some of the terrible estates in this country that have been neglected for decades and which we think we have some new answers to and which we're determined to try out.